Ramadan is a very special time. Often, we are not quite aware of its significance and how it is experienced. To help with that understanding and to think about the opportunities that diversity affords, we will now hear from a select panel. I would like to invite to the stage Ms. Nyambol Dengkwal, a PhD candidate in the College of Health and Biomedicine at Victoria University. Dr. Mario Pauker, Research Fellow from the Institute for Sustainable Industries and Livable Cities at Victoria University. Ms. Stella Smith, General Manager for Community and Government Relations, Melbourne Victory Football Club. Gary Lee, International Education Project Coordinator from the City of Melbourne. You're on. Okay. And we were hoping for Mr. Mohammed Hassan, President of the Islamic Society of Victoria University. Unfortunately, here's an apology this evening. Our panel this evening will be moderated by Dr. Teresa De Fazio, who's Manager of Cultural Diversity at Victoria University.
Yes, unfortunately, Mohammed had some assignments to complete and exams to prepare for. Surprise, surprise, Victoria University, that's what happens. So, but he does send his apologies, and we do have a lovely representation from the VU Islamic Society of students here, so that's fantastic. Now, before I start, I suppose what I'll do is I'll introduce the theme for the evening, and then introduce you to our esteemed panellists, and they all bring various areas of expertise, and I'll go through their bios for you. But just to start, the theme for tonight is social cohesion, a community responsibility. So a nice sort of academic discussion, but one that also has some grassroots to it. So the people that we have here are Mario Pauker, who is a postdoctoral fellow at Victoria University's Institute for Sustainable Industries and Livable Cities. And for the past 15 years, he has worked as a researcher on Muslim community activism and citizenship, inclusion and exclusion dynamics, and far-right political movements both in Europe and Australia. And he's been invited to various consultations around the world. For example, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Racism, Council of Europe. He's the author of Active Muslim Citizenship in the West in 2014 and Muslim Citizenship and Liberal Democracies, Civic and Political Participation in the West, and is working currently on a book as well. So a very busy man. Thank you, Mario, for taking time out to join us for the panel today. Gary Lee. The word dynamic, if anyone knows Gary, it certainly describes him. Gary has, over the last 15 years, worked in international education in the areas of policy development and advice and project management with the City of Melbourne. He originally is from Malaysia and is heavily involved in facets of community, from welcoming new arrivals to empowering international students through sport, dance, volunteering and leadership programs. And Gary brings a personal lived experience to his work. He's also the founder and chief choreographer of a dance crew called, there's two of them, Poison and Poison Bollipop. So, no performance. Now, I was thinking, how do I weave in the dancing, but we're not going to get that tonight. We'll do that another time. He's on the steering committee for the African Music and Cultural Festival. He's an ambassador for the AFL Multicultural Community Program, Melbourne Victory Ambassador, welcome to Australia Ambassador, and he is also he's also been presented with the Australia Day Council New Australian of the Year 2016 for his tireless work. Thanks, Gary, for attending tonight. We have Stella Smith, who is the General Manager of Community and Government Relations for Melbourne Victory Football Club. She's the Director of Blue Light Victoria, Director of Women's Health East, Melbourne Victory Football Club Academy, and committee member. And if any of you don't know, Melbourne Victory Academy is going to be built here on the banks of the Maribyrnong and has a special affiliation with Victoria University. So it's great to have you here with us, Stella. And Stella is the recipient of the Monash University 2015 Award for Outstanding Academic Excellence for Marketing Leadership in Society, and received the Dean's List in 2016 for her Masters in Marketing. We also have Nyambol Kwol, who is our PhD student in biomedical engineering. She's also the founding member and chair of Paramount Chief Kwol Adol Foundation Unite Children in the Kingdom, and is a research director for the Society of South Sudanese Professionals Association. She completed her undergraduate degree here at VU, and then she went off to China to complete her master's degree, as you would. And she has focused in the area of bioengineered blood vessels. Is that right? I got it. So it's interesting. She was able to successfully engineer a blood vessel that mimicked functional and physical properties of human blood vessels. And she has thankfully returned to Victoria University to undertake her studies with us. She's based at the Sunshine Hospital, and apparently her findings are of interest, so it's a watch this space with Nyambol. Thank you very much. So we'll start with the first question, and as I said, the theme was social cohesion, community responsibility. Talking of the values that were mentioned in Ahmet's presentation, and the Vice-Chancellor talking about the work that we do at VU, it seems a good place to start with Mario, perhaps. Now, Australian society seems to be at a particular point regarding how it views social cohesion. And there are undoubtedly a few challenges ahead of us. We're at a particular point. But in order perhaps to set the scene on the topic, what would you say, Mario, we could learn from the research you've been exploring into how community approaches the notion of social cohesion in Australia?
Is this working?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thanks, Teresa, and thanks for having me on this panel. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I've been doing research with and on the Muslim community for the last 7 to 8 years in Victoria and in Australia, and I've learned many things during that time, but with regards to your question, I think that social cohesion is often not explicitly mentioned in the work that Muslim communities are doing, but it is implicitly always there in many different ways. We've done a study at Victoria University that was published last year, where we looked at the Muslim community organizations across Victoria, and just a few examples from that study. We looked at what kind of services they provide, and 85% of Muslim community organizations in Victoria run programs, cross-community programs, dialogue programs, interfaith programs, not always this scope, but basically this is also one of them. That contributes to social networks across different communities, which is a key component of socially cohesive societies. Muslim organizations run empowerment and leadership programs, especially for young people, in order to enable and encourage them to become actively involved in society and possibly also the political space. That's also a component of social cohesion. Even a language course, an English language course for newly arrived immigrants, or a training that is aimed at improving someone's work chances or employability, is also a contribution to social cohesion. We just don't see it as such, because it helps people to find their place in the workforce and participate in society. And one important thing is, on top of all this, Muslim community organizations provide a platform for volunteering, and volunteering is sort of the archetype of a socially cohesive society, that people volunteer and engage civically and politically. And I know that there's this misconception that volunteering within a Muslim community organization is sort of less beneficial than participating in, let's say, the local scout group or whatever, but it is, according to a study we've just finished, it is very beneficial. People who volunteer for a Muslim organization, they build cross-community networks, friendships, they develop a deep sense of general trust in other people, become more tolerant, more open-minded, they become very, very engaged and active, and also quite critical sometimes citizens. They are aware of social issues, they become engaged. Also issues of injustices that affect Muslim communities in Australia and overseas, and other minority groups. So they become active citizens in a way, and these are strong contributions to building a cohesive society.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that idea then of social cohesion being a way of, as you say, networking and connecting with the community and finding one's place is particularly important, and underlies what we're on about tonight, I suppose, and what we're thinking about in terms of the panel. So thank you, Mario. So on that theme then, if we move to Stella, because sport is often seen as having a particular role, and I think when we look at sport, it provides sometimes a very conflicting and very dramatic picture of what's happening in society, and the sort of the drama around what's happening in society sometimes spills over into the sporting field. And we've seen, in a sense, that sport is a bit of a social barometer. So how do you see, from your perspective as a community manager, Stella, the role of sport in terms of social cohesion?
I think sport has an enormous role to play, from grassroots all the way through to professional sport. Our team at Melbourne Victory is incredibly diverse, so we have players who've come from all over the world, players of different backgrounds, players who've settled here in Australia, players who will go and come back again. They speak multiple languages, and they too have to adapt to society here, so they're fantastic role models in that sense. From a grassroots perspective, I think the state government estimates that there are around 580,000 people who volunteer in sport across Victoria. So when you talk about social cohesion from that perspective, sport has an enormous role to play. It's also really good, I think, at calling out the things that people do wrong. When we get it wrong publicly. And I think there have been some examples of that recently, where there's been some bad spectator behaviour in the at AFL games. We've also experienced the same thing in soccer. So we're good at calling it out, we're good at dealing with it, and I think we dealt with the issue of flares, for example, at our games, by having the fans actually say, no, that's not okay. It took us a long time to get to that point, but once the fans said, no, we're not accepting that anymore, the behaviour ended, and hopefully it's gone for good. But I think sport has an incredible role to play, and I think we can continue to use it to engage communities in different ways. So we have a very strong focus at Melbourne Victory on engaging youth. We do a lot of work with Victoria Police. We do a lot of work with councils. There are a number of stakeholders in this room, in fact, that we currently work with. And I think we see sport as a way to not just get people participating and get them physically active, but using sport to connect them into local services as well. So I think we're getting smarter about how we do that, and we're getting smarter about how we keep them engaged in education as well.
Thank you. And I think we've sort of heard then, in a sense, with Mario's discussion, we've heard about sort of social cohesion and what is important for people to get out of sort of these initiatives in order to maintain and create and maintain a socially cohesive society, and the role of sport that it plays. So perhaps I might move to you, Nyambol, from the perspective of a student, and I know you don't speak on behalf of all students all over the place, but from your sort of perspective, in terms of the expectations of education, and then perhaps thinking about one of the expectations we have is to prepare students for the 21st century, where sort of new skills, the notion of being able to take up an active role in the community, contributing to social cohesion in that way. From your experience, do you think that's quite reasonable for education? You're sort of getting your education, and then you're doing all of this as well. How do you feel about that, in a sense?
Thank you, Teresa. I'm not sure if it's working. Is it working? From a student perspective, cohesion, I guess it is something that it is learned at uni, because like of when I started, for example, there is a whole lot of diverse group of people that come from a different background. And one thing that we had in common was that we are here for a reason. We are there to get educations. We are there for the future to come. So we basically have things in common so that make us work together regardless of our background. But applying that to a wider community, it is a different thing, because I have seen a lot of media lately, especially from a South Sudanese person, that branded us as criminals. And those kids also went to school and they have learned the social cohesion, but that did not actually translate to a wider community. So regardless of what we learn at uni, applying it to a wider community, it becomes a different thing, because the wider community, it is not something that we control. There is a whole lot of factors that are related to it. Yeah.
Okay, and so we have got some challenges ahead of us. In terms of international students, Gary, we've got, it's one of our biggest business areas in Victoria in particular, and international students come to our shores, and here we are in an educational community. In terms of thinking about then international students, what scope is there to consider international students as part of this discussion, given that they come here and often spend quite a number of years here and often are making big decisions in their lives based on their experiences here?
So absolutely. Before I go into that, I would like to say thank you to the two gentlemen that did the prayers. It has a special place to my heart because in Malaysia, my house is situated near a mosque, so I hear it daily, and it's beautiful. So it took me home when we had the two recitals. So thank you. International students definitely fit into the space of social cohesion when we talk about that. I like to throw out numbers. I think as of March 2018, there's 534,000 approximately international students in Australia. That's a massive number. So that's 500,000 international students in the country. I also like to do a pop quiz because everyone thinks they know, so I'm going to test you. Do you want to guess what is the first country in terms of students in Australia are from? Ooh, it's quite mixed. No, it is China by far. Second? India. Very good. Third? Not many will get this. What? Indonesia, no. Nepal. Did you say Nepal? It is Nepal. Fourth. You want to guess? Fourth? Yeah, that was a surprise. It's real, so I've checked it out. Number 4. Who was that guess? Not Pakistan. No, it's where I'm from, so it's Malaysia. And the 5th. It is Vietnam. So I think even though we work in the sector, it was a surprise to me as well when I checked. So I will be doing that a fair bit. So there's huge numbers in the country. In Victoria itself, there's, I guess, the last stats was 175,000 international students, generating an income for the state for about $5.6 billion. We're expected that number will increase to 200,000 plus by the end of the year. So that's massive amount of students in the state itself. And you hear a lot of media. Media has a really tough spot for international students and youth. A lot of talks about internationals taking over jobs, but little do we hear the international education sector creates over 30,000 jobs in Victoria alone. A lot of us are here because of international education. We'll be out of a job if they are not here. A lot of the people in this sector has gone through what I guess I like to call diversity fatigue, because we've been talking about diversity for decades. A lot of conversations, but very little has changed. We always look to the media, I guess, and see how diversity is projected over there. A lot of students say they don't see people like themselves there. And I think we know there's not enough representation in leadership. But even on TV, it's slowly getting better. We have Curtis Stone promoting Christmas with some Chinese couple. I think ads are getting better. But reality TV, yes, you have the Asians and the Indians doing MasterChef on My Kitchen Rule, but they can't do Love at First Sight. They can't do The Block, but they're very good at border security, and it seems that they can't work without that. But so the conversations with international students haven't changed over the years since I've been working in the sector. So social inclusion is such an important part of their experience here. And we just had the Melbourne International Student Conference a few weeks ago, and through our co-design workshops, international students say one of the biggest barriers for them is no longer the issues of homesickness. It's important, but it's no longer that. It's about employment. So they say they need jobs, they want to get jobs, but they're not given any opportunity. And we take things for granted, but when you are not accepted here because of your visa, you cannot get full-time job, that takes a hit on your sense of belonging. You go, I've studied here, I've spent 4 years here. We have to understand, and we have to admit to ourselves that internationals, many of them want to stay. They want to stay in the country after they study, they have a bond with the country and with the state. So I think it is important for us to understand that we have to factor them in all our conversations around social cohesion. And for all of us in the room, I think we have to start changing the conversations ourselves. So all those who come from migrant backgrounds, you will understand this. When I introduce myself, I have to justify that Gary is my real name. I have to tell them it's in my passport. But the other question, I think we laugh about it, but it is very important, is when people ask me, where are you from, right? So it doesn't come from a bad place, but they ask you where you're from. So these days, I will annoy the hell out of them, and I will tell them I'm from Seddon. So I'm on the west of Victoria, because I know that is not what they want to know. But a lot of students have said that when people ask that question, it automatically reminds you of where you're from. So you're not from here, you're from somewhere else. So if we start to change the conversations starting from us, I think the general public then will too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a lot there, Gary. I think a round of applause. Some interesting perspectives and a range of interesting perspectives from different areas of expertise and different understandings of the challenges that we have in front of us. And so, Mario, I'll come back to you. Is it, because you've done a lot of work, as we know, with various communities and the Muslim community in particular, so is it a utopian view perhaps then to consider that we could actually achieve a socially cohesive society? Is that sort of just something perhaps that's not going to happen?
No, I have to say no. I don't think it's utopian at all. I think it's an everyday reality in Australia and in other societies. It might be utopian if you think of social cohesion as being a conflict-free zone of social harmony and nothing else. That's not what we consider our team, some of them in the room, to be a socially. That's not how we define social cohesion. Social cohesion is not a conflict-free zone. I would be worried if we lived in Australia and there are no conflicts, because conflict-free, no clashes of different ideas, that reminds me of an authoritarian state and not of a democracy where you need conflict and where you need to clash sometimes and have arguments over things. The problem is that, or not the problem, what we need and what a social cohesive society needs is to negotiate and renegotiate these constantly arising and changing challenges based on certain principles of non-violence, for example, based on respect, based on certain values that we have to uphold. So it's more about how we manage and deal with conflicts that will always be there, based on mutual respect. And Ahmed, you've used the term respect quite often, and I think that's key here. A recognition of difference and human dignity. That's what it has to be based on.
Okay, thank you, Mario. So if we go perhaps down to Stella, your role as for Melbourne Victory provides you with an opportunity to sort of work with the community in a particular way, quite a special way. So you're bridging sport and you're looking at community, and I know you work with disengaged youth, you have group programs in Parkville Detention Centre, or Correction Centre, I'm not sure what it's called, sorry. And you're going out down down into regional areas, and working with communities in specific ways. You're working with girls, you're working with unemployed, etc. So perhaps tell us a little bit from your perspective, what is important to you as a community manager, sort of in terms of what you're trying to achieve when you go out into the community and organise these programs?
Sure. I think for us the priority is to find organisations that have like-minded values. So rather than delivering a program, we can turn up with a bag of footballs and a coach and get kids to come out and play. That's the easy part. It's what do we do with football beyond that? What do we get these kids involved in? And youth is an absolute passion for the club. We're really about how we help young people, particularly disengaged and disadvantaged youth. You mentioned the Parkville program. That we work with the teachers at Parkville College in the Youth Detention Centre to encourage the kids to participate in their education, and they've actually found that the kids who go through our program are more engaged in their studies. So we're really interested in partnerships that we can have for the long term, partnerships that will deliver more than just participation in football and more than just fan outcomes. We partner in a program in Hume, for example, where there are 17 stakeholders working in the areas of mental health, tackling recidivist crime, working with kids on their housing estate. We work with a number of local councils, and we're really interested in partnerships that will actually generate something beyond just the sport. So I think for us, the partnership with VU, for example, where we're now working not just on the football academy, where we'll look at development of our youth program. We also have our women's program that will run from the academy site. We will have a partnership with Victoria Police that will deliver a program for kids who are identified as at risk of offending, who will go through either a high performance football program or learn new skills to referee and to coach. So we're very big on giving kids opportunities to actually get employment out of our programs as well, not just with us, but across the grassroots community. How do we upskill young people? So also with VU, one of the things that I'm really excited about now is the project that I get to work on with Teresa, where we'll look at the evaluation of community programs to see what sort of social outcomes we're actually getting and how we measure those. So we're looking at how we build a framework for community engagement. What does it look like? What value is it contributing back to society? Because we talk about it a lot, we understand that it's happening, we understand we're engaging kids in education, we understand that sport's doing that across the board, and sport, regardless of the sport that you play or the club that you follow, makes an enormous contribution to the community. So if we can start to measure that and put some really solid numbers around it, that's the stuff that I think will help us all with government, with funding, with support across the board.
Thank you, Stella. And I think it sounds like quite a long list of community programs that you are involved in. So just going to Nyambol, you've talked about some of the sort of discrepancy in a sense, because we're sort of talking about social cohesion, but then the reality can be quite different at times. As Mario said, it's not perfect, but it's that's probably not realistic. However, Nyambol, for yourself, you've established a new life in Australia. You've come here. You're taking up studies, and I know that was a particular choice. That was that sort of puts you. Not only are you a PhD at the top of your sort of, doing academically quite well, but you are going to end up being, and you are now, quite a role model for your community. And being a woman, you've said yourself that puts you in a particular position. In terms of your reflections of how the wider community then might engage with the notion of social cohesion, from your perspective, what would be your reflections there?
I think everyone play a big role in ensuring that we live in in environment where everybody is represented, and I think for the minority of group like South Sudan community, for example. So I'm just going to quote this lady called Shima Menda. She's an author, and she is a Nigerian author. She said the danger of single story. The single story, it is not that it is untrue, but you're actually narrowing people to that one particular perception. So you're looking at those people at one lens. And it seemed to be what happens sometimes to minority groups. So, and if someone did something really that doesn't sit well with the society, then you're actually you're somehow correlating that to the community. And I'm talking from South Sudanese community perspective. The APEC gang doesn't represent South Sudanese community, but it seemed like we have been looked down only on that lens. And it affects the most of our communities. Let's say, for example, the elderly people that didn't actually have those kind of criminal records that only those young people did. But if you take yourself and put yourself into those people positions, said, okay, like, and if the white kid do crime things, they always explain and say, like, maybe like they have drugs problems, they have alcohol problems. Why don't black kids also have those kind of excuses? To me, it is excuses, of course. So I am not saying that those kids are not doing something bad, but why not try to understand from their parent perspective? So I think like for us to actually understand each other of where we all came from, we need to create the sense of belonging. Like the majority of us don't feel like we belonged. Someone like me, for example, like I did my first job in this country, but I still feel like I don't belong. And I'm doing whatever that I'm doing right now just to prove to people that, you know what, I can do it. So you can mark me down as a gang, mark me down as whatever that you want, but I'm going to prove you wrong. But it is not everyone that have that perceptions. So, and if you think less about people, that is what they're going to be. So give them that. So probably, like, I think the only way that we can coexist, give us the benefit of doubt to prove you wrong. Give us that sense of belonging to call this country a home. Like, I have been here for God knows how long now. And because obviously I have an accent, and that means because I have another language that I speak, it doesn't mean that I don't know English. So give me that sense of belonging so I can call this country a home for me, because it is a home. I cannot be a migrant, I cannot be a refugee forever. So there have to be a time of where I step out from being a refugee, but now consider me as Australian, because the contributions that I'm doing in this country contribute to the wider society. So give us the sense of belonging, include us in those system, like the structural system making. So, and I need to know that I have been represented, and not like seeing a white person every day doesn't really represent me. I want someone that looks like me. Those kids that are doing a bad thing right now, it is because that their perception is that, and if I go to school, for example, I can become a PhD student, I can become a doctor, but guess where I will end up? A factory. So obviously there is no motivation for them to actually aspire to do more. But if we put people who actually studied doctorate and be actually a doctor, and then those kids can actually see that, guess what, I can be someone too. So I think that it is a responsibility for all of us to make everyone feel welcome and give them a benefit of a doubt.
Thank you, Nyambol. That's a pretty powerful reflection, I think, that has made us all think, and for you to share your personal experience is terrific. Thank you very much. I think we're all gifted tonight. And that's what Iftars are all about. It's about a moment to reflect and to ground ourselves a little, to really centre and come to understand how we might all come together, because I think we all have come together tonight, bringing in our various areas of expertise. Sport international students' work and policies and all the work. I can't even encapsulate all the work you do, Gary. Mario, with your research, pivotal research, and I know all the panel members here are extremely committed to working with the community. They're tireless workers. So thank you very, very much for sharing your insights, your perspectives, your experiences, and your inspiration to keep at it. Thank you.